It was June 5th back in 2016 when a married couple walked into that press conference looking mighty proud of what they had done. They loved each other almost as much as they loved climbing, serving as police constables back home in the state of Maharashtra, India. In the end, the mountain always tells the truth, even if it takes 4 long years for that cold, hard truth to finally come out. Some lies are carved deep in stone, but up here on Everest, they are written in ice that always melts under the harsh sun. These climbers learn the hard way that you cannot cheat the mountain, because eventually gravity and truth will pull everything down to the bottom. Stay bold and live brave. But remember that the summit is only halfway there, and the descent is where the devil truly waits. But the story of deception on these high peaks does not end with just a few forged photos and some stolen moments of glory. To understand why folks risk their reputation for a piece of paper, you have to understand the deadly allure of the death zone itself. Above 26,000 feet, the human body begins to die, consuming its own muscle tissue just to keep the heart pumping blood. Your brain swells in the thin air, causing hallucinations that can make a sane man walk right off the edge of a cliff. It is a place where morality freezes over, and climbers have been known to step over dying bodies just to reach the top. This desperation creates a breeding ground for dishonesty, where the line between reality and hallucination blurs into a white haze of freezing snow. They were respected members of their community with real careers, not just drifters looking for trouble on the frozen slopes of the Himalayas. The commercialization of Everest has turned this sacred goddess, mother of the world, into a high-stakes playground for the wealthy and the desperate. When you have paid nearly $100,000 for a ticket to the top, going home empty-handed feels like a death sentence. This financial pressure is the fuel that burns in the engine of fraud, pushing honest people to do things they would never imagine. Imagine standing in a queue at the Hillary step, waiting for hours while your oxygen tank slowly ticks down to 0% left. The fear of failure is a cold hand gripping your heart, whispering that it would be easier to lie than to try again. In the old days, a climber's word was their bond, signed in blood and sweat, but those days are gone with the wind. Now we live in an age of digital surveillance, where satellites and metadata watch every step you take on the roof of the world. The mystery is fading, replaced by the cold, hard data of GPS tracks that paint a picture of truth no liar can hide. Yet even with all this technology, the mountain retains a savage power that can humble the proudest man in a split second. It is a mirror that reflects your true self, stripping away the ego until only the raw animal instinct to survive remains. Back in 2014, they claimed to conquer the Aussie 10, which means climbing up the 10 highest rocky peaks down under in Australia. For those who try to fake it, the mountain becomes a prison of their own making, a cold memory that will never thaw. The silence up there is heavy, a weight that presses down on your soul long after you have descended back to the flatlands. You carry the ghosts of the decisions you made on those ridges, haunting your sleep in the quiet hours of the deep, dark night. A summit certificate might hang on a wall, but it cannot warm the chill that settles in your bones when you know it is fake. Real climbers know that the true trophy is survival, returning home with all your fingers and toes in a story that is genuinely yours. The mountain demands a toll for passage, and if you try to sneak by without paying, it will collect the debt in other ways. History remembers the brave souls who failed with honor far better than it remembers the cowards who succeeded through the art of cheap trickery. Think of Mallory and Irvine, lost in the clouds for decades. Their legend built on the mystery of whether they made it or not. They did not need a piece of paper to prove their worth, because their spirit is woven into the very fabric of that mountain. In contrast, these modern frauds fade into obscurity, becoming nothing more than cautionary tales whispered around campfires by those who respect the old ways. That is a brutal challenge that will either bring a couple closer together or tear them apart like a cotton shirt in a gale. The icefall is a shifting maze of death, a chaotic grinder that does not care if you are a prince or a simple pauper. Every step through that frozen labyrinth is a gamble with the devil, and you are betting your life on the roll of the dice. When you look into the eyes of a Sherpa who has summited 20 times, you see a depth that no tourist can ever buy. They are the true guardians of the goddess mother, watching silently as egos come and go like clouds passing over the high, jagged peaks. It is a strange world where people pay a fortune to suffer, seeking meaning in the thin air, where life hangs by a thread. Perhaps we are all just looking for something real in a world that has become increasingly fake, plastic, and disconnected from the natural order. But finding that reality requires stripping away the mask, not putting on a new one painted with lies and digitally altered summit photos. The wind at the South Pole screams a language that only the dying can understand, a warning to turn back before it is too late. Those who ignore that warning often become permanent markers on the trail, distinct, colorful waypoints for the next generation of dreamers marching up. It is a grim reality that sits uncomfortably next to the commercial dreams of glory, a reminder that nature is red in tooth and claw. When they came back home claiming sweet victory, the local media celebrated them like they were returning war heroes from a great distant battle. So when you see a photo of a hero on the summit, look closely at the shadows and ask yourself, what is truly real? You might fool the papers for a week or a month, but you can never fool the mountain that stands eternal and silent watching you. A lie is like a crack in a carabiner, invisible at first, but destined to snap when the weight of the world pulls down. Standing on a podium built on deceit is lonelier than standing on the summit ridge with nothing but the howling wind for company. The price of admission to the top of the world is paid in courage, not in Photoshop skills or stolen memories from better men. To the Sherpas who carry our dreams on their backs, a fake summit is an insult to the sacred ground they walk upon daily. Coming down is always harder than going up, especially when you have to carry the heavy burden of a secret that burns your soul. The snow does not judge you and the ice does not care, but the truth has a way of thawing out when spring comes. Maybe these scandals were a necessary evil, a wake-up call to bring honor back to a sport that had lost its true north. We track climbers with satellites now, but no machine can measure the heart of a person who pushes past their limit to survive. But that praise was not enough to satisfy them, so they decided to stake their claim on the highest mountain this earth has got. That triangle of black rock cutting into the jet stream is a siren song calling the brave and the foolish to their destiny. Your lungs scream for air that is not there, and your blood turns to sludge as you fight for one more single step up. It is a mental game played on the edge of oblivion, where a single slip means falling forever into the deep blue silence below. You can buy the best gear money can get, but you cannot buy the respect that comes from looking death in the eye and winning. Those police officers lost their badges and their honor, trading a lifetime of service for a moment of fake glory that turned to ash. They swore an oath to uphold the truth, yet they broke that vow on the highest stage imaginable for the whole world to see. Narender might have climbed it for real in the end, but the shadow of his deception will always walk one step behind him. You can wash your gear and scrub your boots, but you cannot wash away the stain of a lie told to a whole nation. Let this be a warning to anyone looking for a shortcut to the top, because the fall from grace is a long way down. Long after we are gone and our stories are forgotten, the mountain will still be there, scratching the belly of the sky in silence. They wanted this so bad they swore a sacred vow never to bring a child into this world until they stood on top together. We build our monuments and chase our dreams, but in the end we are just temporary guests in a land of eternal frozen ice. The wind erases footprints in seconds, a reminder that our presence here is fleeting and our egos are nothing but dust in the gale. Truth is the only thing that leaves a permanent mark on the soul, etching a scar that tells a story of survival and honor. When you stand on the roof of the world, make sure you climb there with your own 2 feet and a heart full of truth. Because if you cheat the climb, you are only cheating yourself out of the one thing that money and fame can never truly buy. The goddess mother watches all, seeing through the filters and the edits to the trembling human heart beating underneath all that expensive nylon gear. So keep your boots on the ice and your eyes on the horizon, but never let ambition blind you to the difference between right and wrong. This world is full of pretenders wearing costumes of bravery, but out here in the wild, the mask always slips when the storm hits hard. We honor the fallen by climbing with integrity, ensuring that every step we take is a testament to the raw power of the human spirit. Do not let the glitter of gold medals distract you from the cold reality of the frostbite and the fear that defines true adventure. For 2 long years, they scraped together every rupee they could find and trained their bodies for the freezing hell of the death zone. There is no shortcut to greatness. only a long, hard road paved with suffering, sacrifice, and the quiet satisfaction of doing it the right way. The story of Everest is written in blood and ice, not in ink on a certificate that can be torn up and thrown away. As the sun sets on these peaks, it casts a shadow over the lies of the past, leaving only the stark truth in the light. Remember that a hero is not measured by the height they reach, but by the honesty of the journey they took to get there. Let the wind carry away the deceit, cleansing the mountain for those who come with pure hearts and a willingness to face the unknown. The summit will always be there, waiting for those who are worthy enough to stand on its shoulders without the crutch of a lie. Stay wild and stay true, because in the end, your reputation is the only thing you get to take with you to the grave. We tell these stories not to shame the fallen, but to remind the living that the path of honor is always the harder road to walk. From the bottom of the ocean to the top of the sky, the truth remains the only compass that will never lead you astray. Thank you for walking this ridge with us today, exploring the dark corners of ambition where the air is thin and the stakes are high. When Dinesh stood up at that press conference in Kathmandu, his voice was shaking like a leaf in the wind with pure emotion. Until next time, keep your carabiners locked and your spirit ready for whatever storm is brewing just over the edge of the next horizon. This is the extreme edge, where we separate the climbers from the tourists and the truth from the fiction in the harshest place on earth. Every step is a lesson, every fall is a teacher, and every summit is a privilege that must be earned with sweat and honesty. The mountain does not need your lies to be majestic. It stands tall, regardless of the petty games we humans play at its feet. So pack your gear and check your conscience, because the higher you go, the harder it becomes to hide who you really are inside. Life is a climb, but the view is only beautiful if you can look at yourself in the mirror when you get back down. We leave the ghosts of the past on the glacier, moving forward with a renewed respect for the unyielding power of the natural world. Stay bold, live brave, and never forget that the greatest adventure of all is simply telling the truth when it would be easier to lie. The ice is melting, revealing what was hidden, and demanding that we face the reality of our choices before the sun goes down tonight. I will see you in the next one, where we will chase another story from the edge of sanity and the brink of disaster. He told the gathering crowd that, with their pride now intact, they were finally ready to become parents and start a family together. This is the end of the line for now, but the mountain remains eternal and waiting for the next soul brave enough to try. They stood tall as the first Indian couple to scale Mount Everest together, a feat that would surely make headlines across the globe. The whole room erupted in loud applause, but little did they know that the foundation of this celebration was built entirely on sinking sand. They were front-page news back home, celebrated as heroes, but there was one tiny little problem that was fixing to ruin everything they built. The photos they were showing off to the whole world were completely fake, a house of cards waiting for a stiff breeze to blow. A software engineer named Satyrup Siddhanta was scrolling through the news when he saw something that made his jaw drop straight to the floor. He realized those were not their photos at all, because they were actually his photos taken when he climbed that mountain 2 days earlier. He took to Facebook and blew the lid off the operation, posting proof that they had stolen his hard-earned moments of frozen glory. Experts started looking closer at the pictures, and they found mistakes so obvious it is honestly embarrassing for anyone claiming to be a professional. In one photo, Tarakeshwari is wearing red climbing boots, but in another shot, taken just minutes later, she is suddenly wearing a yellow pair. Now, I have never climbed Everest, but I reckon nobody is stopping to change their shoes at 29,000 feet in the death zone. Their jackets were changing colors like a chameleon, and their oxygen masks were appearing and disappearing like some kind of cheap parlor magic trick. Every major newspaper in India ran their story, showing off summit photos that looked so crisp you might think they were painted by hand. The real kicker was that the shadows and lighting were identical in every single different photo they claimed to take during that long climb. You might wonder how the Nepal Department of Tourism, whose job it is to verify summits, just looked at those fakes and stamped them. Back then, Nepal was not exactly a technology powerhouse, and the system just was not built to catch folks using digital trickery to cheat. They claimed they reached the summit at 6:25 in the morning, but the sun in their stolen photos was high at noon. When investigators tried to find the Sherpa guides who supposedly led them up, those men had vanished into thin air like ghosts in mist. Other climbers who were actually on the peak that morning confirmed the summit was empty when the couple claimed to be standing right there. Nepal launched an official investigation, but it was a short one because the evidence was piling up higher than a drift in a blizzard. On August 30th of 2016, they got slapped with a 10-year climbing ban, effectively ending their dreams of glory in the mountains. But the worst was yet to come, because the Maharashtra Police Department did not take too kindly to being made fools of by their own. Believe it or not, they were not the only ones pulling stunts. And 3 years later, another group from India tried the same trick. But something about that picture-perfect story just did not sit right. Because usually when things look too good to be true, they are. On May 26th of 2019, 3 climbers from small villages prepared to tell a lie that would echo through the empty valleys. Their plan was risky, but for these 3 kids, an Everest summit would change their family's social standing forever in those small rural towns. They had scraped together every single rupee they could find, throwing everything they had into this one desperate shot at eternal glory and fame. Their strategy seemed simple enough to work. Just climb partway up the mountain and claim they reached the top when nobody else was watching. On May 26, back in 2019, they made their big announcement claiming they had reached the summit with 4 loyal Sherpa guides. Back home, the celebration was incredible, with local newspapers running stories and politicians lining up just to shake the hands of these new heroes. Their families were crying tears of joy, believing their children had touched the sky, but there was one tiny problem with their perfect story. According to the official expedition records for that day, absolutely nobody summited Everest on May 26 because the mountain was closed for business. The weather had turned nasty with high winds that would blow a man right off the ridge, forcing every experienced team to turn back. Naturally, journalists started asking some basic questions, like what exactly were the names of those 4 Sherpa guides who supposedly saved their young lives? What happened next would peel back the layers of a deception that went deeper than just 2 folks looking for a little glory. You would think after spending 2 months surviving the death zone with 4 people, you might remember their names or at least a nickname. The 3 climbers looked at each other like deer caught in headlights before one finally admitted quietly that they did not know the names. When reporters asked to see their summit photos, they refused to show them to anyone, not even to their own families back at home. Their own expedition company saw the writing on the wall and threw them under the bus, telling investigators they never got near the top. The managing director confirmed that the climbers had actually turned back at Camp 3, which sits way down at 23,000 feet high. Facing the heat, the 3 climbers vanished into the shadows, ignoring official calls and hoping this storm of accusations would eventually just blow over. But their guide spoke up, saying the climbers gave up on May 25th because they were physically unable to move past Camp 3. They were just regular folks swept up in an obsession they were not ready for, finding themselves physically broken by the unforgiving mountain terrain. While their lie fell apart quickly, another deceiver named Narender Singh Yadav was playing a much longer game that would shock the whole nation. It was August 29th of 2020 when Narender was preparing to receive the prestigious Tenzing Norgay National Adventure Award for his climbing. It reveals a sickness where climbers claim summits on days the mountain is closed, and speakers build careers on 29,000 feet of lies. This was the highest honor in India for adventure sports, and it was rightfully going to be presented to him by the president himself. He spent 4 years traveling the country as a speaker, inspiring thousands of young people with a story that was fabricated from start to finish. But at the very last minute, his name was suddenly pulled from that ceremony list, leaving folks wondering what skeleton had just fallen out. Behind the scenes, the mountaineering community was in an uproar, whispering that something was very wrong with his claims of conquering that frozen peak. It turned out that Narender had never actually summited Mount Everest back in 2016, and the evidence against him was becoming impossible to ignore. When experts looked at his photos, they found signs of digital trickery, with lighting that did not match and shadows falling in the wrong direction. Authorities traced his movements and discovered he had been rescued at 26,000 feet, nearly 2,000 feet below where he claimed to be. He was in such bad shape that other climbers had to risk their own lives to drag him down safely through the freezing death zone. Yet somehow this man, who could not make it to the top without being rescued, managed to convince officials that he had successfully reached the summit. Here is the twisted part. Because the photos he stole and manipulated belonged to the very same man who helped save his life that day. These are the biggest Everest lies ever caught on camera, a testament to how far folks will go when ambition blinds them to truth. Satirap Siddhanta was part of that rescue team, and he was shocked to see the man he saved holding a certificate for a successful climb. Other climbers at base camp testified they saw him hanging around comfortably on the day he was supposedly standing on top of the world alone. When Nepal finally demanded solid proof of his climb, Narender stopped answering his phone and went into hiding, hoping the trouble would just fade away. In February of 2021, the government officially revoked his summit certificate and slapped him with a 6-year ban from climbing in Nepal. Most folks caught in a lie that big would disappear in shame, moving to a new town and starting over with a brand new name. But Narender did something that nobody saw coming, because exactly 6 years after his fraudulent claim, he returned to the mountain that had exposed him. On May 20th, back in 2022, right after his ban expired, he quietly launched a new expedition to settle the score for good. After months of training in silence, he pushed himself up those slopes and finally stood on the genuine summit of Mount Everest for the first time. He went from base camp to the top in just 6 days, setting a record for the fastest ascent by an Indian climber that season. Standing there in the thin air, he told reporters he felt reborn, having finally earned the view he had lied about for so many years. Welcome to the extreme edge, where the air is thin and the stories are wilder than a coyote howling at a harvest moon. You have to wonder about the mental strength it took to go back to the place where he was humiliated and face those demons down. If he had the strength to climb it for real later, you have to ask yourself why he felt the need to fake it back then. See, in India, a summit is not just a climb, it is a golden ticket to a life most folks down there can only dream about. State governments offer cash prizes ranging from 500,000 to 1 million rupees, which is a fortune for a family scraping by in the village. If you already hold a government job, a successful climb can earn you massive promotions that would normally take a lifetime of hard work to achieve. The pressure is heavy because success does not just lift up the climber, it elevates their entire family and community in the eyes of high society. Once you tell the world you are going, the shame of coming back empty-handed is a burden that feels heavier than the mountain itself. When faced with the choice between admitting defeat and constructing a lie, some chose deception out of a desperate fear of letting everyone down back home. It was not just greed driving them, but a perfect storm created by a verification system in Nepal that was shockingly weak for a long time. Certificates were handed out based on nothing but photos, with no requirement for GPS tracking to prove a climber actually stood where they said they did. Now let me tell you about Dinesh and Tarakeshwari Rathod, a couple married for 8 years who shared a hunger for the high peaks. Every fraudulent summit undermines the blood and sweat of legitimate climbers, casting a shadow of doubt over every true accomplishment made on that high peak. But there are heroes in this story too, like the rescuers who refused to stay silent about who they saved and who they did not save. Expedition companies finally started choosing integrity over profit, realizing that protecting a lie was more dangerous to their reputation than admitting a client had failed. Since these scandals broke, both Nepal and India have overhauled their rules, now demanding strict GPS data and expert analysis of every single summit photo. The age of easy fraud is over, forcing climbers to prove their worth with undeniable data rather than just a smile and a doctored picture. The real tragedy is that many of these fraudsters were not elite athletes, but ordinary people who got lost in a dangerous game of giants. They were police constables and village youths who lacked the high-altitude experience needed to survive the harsh reality of the top of the world. Swept up in a cultural obsession, they found themselves physically and mentally broken by a challenge they had no business attempting in the first place. Mount Everest does not care about your motivations or the promises you made to your spouse, nor does it care about the hopes of your village. It judges everyone with the same cold indifference, stripping away ambition until only the raw truth of your physical and mental strength remains standing there.